Don't compare yourself to anyone. Don't compare yourself to anyone. In the vast and multifaceted tapestry of human existence, one of the most pervasive and corrosive tendencies that individuals often succumb to is the inclination to compare themselves to others. This seemingly innocuous habit, deeply rooted in the human psyche, can subtly but powerfully erode self-esteem, diminish personal fulfillment, and foster feelings of inadequacy. The ubiquitous nature of comparison is exacerbated in today's hyper-connected, social media-driven world, where curated images of seemingly perfect lives are presented as a benchmark for success and happiness. Yet, the act of comparison, while a natural part of the human experience, can be an insidious source of psychological distress and existential discontent if left unchecked. Therefore, one of the most transformative choices an individual can make on the journey of self-actualization is to consciously and intentionally abstain from comparing themselves to others. The root of comparison, evolutionary and social conditioning. To understand why the tendency to compare ourselves to others is so deeply ingrained in our consciousness, it is essential to explore its evolutionary underpinnings. From an anthropological standpoint, comparison was once a mechanism for survival. Early humans, living in small social groups, relied on comparison to assess their standing within the tribe, whether in terms of access to resources, social status, or reproductive opportunities. Social comparison theory, first proposed by psychologist Leon Festinger in 1954, suggests that humans have an innate tendency to evaluate themselves through the lens of others. This process, in its primordial form, was adaptive, ensuring that individuals understood their relative status in the group and could adjust their behavior accordingly to secure their place within the social hierarchy. However, in the contemporary world, the utility of comparison has become less clear-cut. The rapid advancement of technology, coupled with the ubiquity of social media, has created a distorted landscape in which people are constantly exposed to images, narratives, and portrayals of others' lives, often idealized and curated. What is often not visible are the unseen struggles, imperfections, and contradictions that underlie these seemingly perfect lives. This disparity between reality and perception fuels the desire for comparison and creates an illusory sense of inadequacy. What we fail to recognize is that the comparison we make is often to a version of a person or situation that does not exist in its true, unfiltered form. The perils of comparison. Psychological and emotional consequences. The act of comparing oneself to others, whether in terms of appearance, achievements, relationships, or possessions, can lead to an array of psychological consequences, ranging from anxiety and depression to diminished self-worth. When individuals measure their lives against others, they inevitably encounter a distorted benchmark that fails to take into account the complexities of their own unique journey. This can lead to cognitive dissonance, a psychological state in which there is a clash between one's perception of themselves and the ideals they measure against, causing emotional distress. One of the most immediate effects of comparison is the undermining of self-esteem. By focusing on how others measure up in comparison to oneself, the individual inadvertently discounts their own intrinsic worth. This process, over time, can lead to a persistent feeling of lack, a sense that one is somehow incomplete, unworthy, or unsuccessful. As a result, individuals may begin to lose sight of their personal strengths, unique contributions, and individual path. The joy of self-discovery is often overshadowed by the incessant longing to be more like someone else, which is a self-defeating cycle. Furthermore, envy and resentment are common emotional byproducts of comparison. When we perceive others as having something we lack, be it material wealth, physical appearance, or social success, there is a tendency to develop negative feelings toward them. These emotions, if left unchecked, can contribute to the deterioration of relationships, both with oneself and with others. In this way, comparison fosters a scarcity mindset, where there is a belief that there is not enough success, love, or fulfillment to go around, and that another person's gain is directly linked to one's own loss. The illusion of perfection, social media, and the highlight reel syndrome. In today's digital age, the act of comparison has been amplified and distorted by the prevalence of social media platforms, where individuals curate their lives to present an idealized version of themselves. This curated content, often meticulously edited and filtered, is presented as a showcase of success, happiness, and personal achievement. The consequence of this phenomenon is the rise of what could be called the highlight reel syndrome, a skewed portrayal of life that emphasizes only the moments of triumph and suppresses the complexities of failure or imperfection. For many, social media becomes a breeding ground for unhealthy comparisons. When scrolling through posts that depict others as living seemingly perfect lives, be it through their professional accomplishments, glamorous vacations, or idealized relationships, it is easy to fall into the trap of believing that one's own life is somehow inferior. However, what is often overlooked in these images is the immense effort, curation, and sometimes manipulation behind them. Social media is not an accurate reflection of reality, but rather a selective presentation of it. As psychologist Sherry Turkle aptly notes, social media fosters an environment where people are not only presenting a version of themselves to others, but also to themselves, curating an ideal self-image for the sake of external validation. Thus, the more one engages in social media comparison, the more they are likely to experience a dissonance between the illusion of perfection they encounter online and their own lived experience. The psychological toll of this dissonance can be profound, leading to feelings of inadequacy, self-doubt, and alienation. What this illustrates is that comparison based on curated or superficial metrics is not only a futile exercise, but a deeply damaging one. The importance of embracing your unique journey. In order to free oneself from the destructive cycle of comparison, it is imperative to shift focus from others to oneself. Personal growth should not be measured by how closely one aligns with the accomplishments or attributes of another, but rather by how deeply one connects to their own values, aspirations, and authenticity. Embracing one's unique path is liberating because it allows an individual to define their worth based on self-reflection rather than external validation. When one begins to prioritize their own growth and journey, comparison becomes irrelevant as the individual recognizes that their path is theirs alone to create. This is not to say that we should reject inspiration or influence from others, but rather that we should embrace these influences without adopting them as templates for our own lives. There is a fine line between learning from others and losing oneself in the process of mimicking them. True personal development arises when individuals acknowledge their distinctiveness, their talents, quirks, and experiences, and leverage those qualities to craft a life that aligns with their innermost desires. The power of self-compassion and acceptance. Another critical element in ceasing to compare oneself to others is the practice of self-compassion and acceptance. When individuals begin to treat themselves with kindness and understanding, they are less likely to engage in self-destructive comparison. Self-compassion involves acknowledging that you are doing your best in any given situation and accepting that you, like everyone else, are imperfect and flawed. This sense of acceptance creates a sense of inner peace, where external comparisons become irrelevant because they no longer define one's sense of worth. In practicing self-compassion, individuals are encouraged to celebrate their unique strengths, the qualities that make them who they are, rather than focusing on perceived shortcomings. The act of self-affirmation is an antidote to the negativity that comparison breeds. By cultivating a mindset that appreciates the present moment and the journey, individuals can find joy in their own progress rather than fixating on what others have or where they seem to be. Conclusion: liberation from the trap of comparison. To cease comparing oneself to others is to step into a life of freedom. Freedom from the suffocating grip of external expectations and societal pressures. It is an invitation to engage in a journey of self-discovery, where growth is defined not by the accomplishments of others, but by the development of one's own unique potential. By relinquishing the habit of comparison, individuals can cultivate a profound sense of inner peace, self-worth, and authenticity, liberated from the relentless pursuit of external validation. As psychologist Carl Rogers once said, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." This is the ultimate freedom, the ability to become your most authentic self, unconstrained by the illusory standards of others.